But I just want to welcome you all. My name is Leanne Gibali. I'm the Director of Programming at Village Preservation. And thank you for joining us. This is a webinar I've been looking forward to for quite some time. So just a little bit about Village Preservation before we get started. We are a membership organization as well as a nonprofit organization. So we have 75 plus of these types of events in person, online every year, and we're able to support this with great donations and membership with people like you. So if you have a second device and want to check out this QR code, that's where you can find out about membership. And I would be remiss if I don't tell you about two more really exciting webinars we have coming up. On September 21st, we have a really great panel that's going to help walk us through YIMBY versus NIMBY and looking past those labels to see really what that means for housing, gentrification, sustainability. So that will be great. So again, a free webinar next week, sign up for that. And then the day after, we're celebrating 75th Ave, a historic building that has a lot of history, and it's a little launch into our Village Preservation Village Voices event. So that's coming as well. So thank you for your time in listening to this. Village Preservation also does a lot of advocacy work. So please go to our website to find out about that, along with other programs you can join us with. But I will stop sharing my screen and I'm going to get to the issue at hand, which is to learn about this extraordinary person and turn it over to Mary, who has some great things to share with us, both digitally and in her hands. So Mary, take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, before I share my screen, let me just introduce myself. I'm Mary Brown. I've been part of this audience before for a long time, and I've come to appreciate what a great and knowledgeable audience it is. And so I was really honored when they chose this to be part of the, the offerings, because what you're looking at behind me is part of Marymount Manhattan College, its archive. And in our archive, we have a collection called the William Harris Papers. This is an actual item from the papers, a poster from the Ridiculous Theater Company from Sheridan Square from the 1980s. I'm going to walk you through the kinds of things in this collection today. I'm going to talk about the kinds of things that we already know about the collection, and what I'm hoping to get from you all is some more ideas, questions you might have about the collection, which will give me ideas about what to do with it, and maybe ideas you have for things we could do with it or things we could learn from it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to try to do is share my screen. So there's the little green button, there's the screen thing, there's share, and you should all see something that looks like a slideshow, and it says Enthusiast, Extraordinaire, Theater Critic, William B. Harris, and Lower Manhattan in the late 20th century. That's our program this evening. And the program comes in 4 parts, and you'll be able to keep track of where we are because I color-coded them. The bubbly background that you can see right now is the introduction. I'll talk about how we got the papers and sort of the size and scope of the collection. And then we'll dive into 3 things that we can do with this collection. It is a theater collection, and it documents the downtown avant-garde of the late 20th century. I have to give you a little biography of Billy in just a minute. It documents the transition of downtown from a place where an avant-garde performer, somebody who was kind of on the fringe, could book space for a short run of a program that might itself change as it went through different productions. And nowadays it's hard to get space down there at any price. And how did that develop? And these papers cover the time period when people first began to sicken with AIDS. And so I wanted to talk about the paper's ability to document that as well. So those are our topics this evening. Let's start with the papers themselves. Billy Harris, who is seen here, one of his friends did a little portrait session with him. Was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His full name was William Balber Harris. He was born in Pittsburgh, April the 9th, 1951. Upon graduation from Hartford, Connecticut's Trinity College, he moved to New York. He wrote for business magazines, mostly as something that brought in a regular income. He wrote for Forbes, an institutional investor, and he was also the managing editor of Treasury and Risk Management and The Daily Deal. However, what leads us to today's presentation was that Mr. Harris was a freelance dance and drama critic who covered the downtown scene from 1975 to his unexpected death in July of 2000, when he was about 49 years old. When Billy died, his mother, his brother, and his sister wanted to donate his papers somewhere they'd be used. And his friend, the late Ellen Levine, who lived on Perry Street, made the connection to Donna Hurwitz, the director of the library at Marymount Manhattan College. That's Donna at the podium. That's our past president holding a lamp so she can see. Donna thought an archives would set Marymount Manhattan apart, give it some distinction from other schools. And Mr. Harris's papers have indeed become the nucleus of what's now a half dozen collections of theatrical papers from various sources that I am privileged to take care of. Here is a shot of the papers in their home in the archives. I'm sitting at the table. You can see there in the picture. This is not all of the papers. There are some papers to the left of the photo that I could not quite fit in. And also not everything in the picture is papers. That white garment bag there does not belong to the Harris collection. It contains the costume of our mascot, Gary the Griffin, who has been replaced by a new mascot, Griffey the Griffin. So I got Gary the Griffin, and there he is in that little shroud. Anyway, this is where the collection is, where students are free to come and use it. They make appointments and come, and where we're hoping also to get the public. I do answer queries on email from the public. I've had about, I don't know, half a dozen since the papers have been here, and they've been here about 15 years. The papers are available online. I realize the websites look pretty formidable. So let me just explain that there's 3 deposits. The original deposit, the one from Billy's mother and brother and sister, consisted of Billy's study papers, and they're really the heart of the collection. There's about 151 boxes of material that Mr. Harris used to prepare reviews that he wrote, or just to study the theater in various ways. And then one of his friends, Elizabeth Bailey, was kind enough to give this archive her collection of Billy's own reviews. The Harris family took, his collection with them. They wanted to hold on to their son and brother's reviews, but Elizabeth gave me hers. And so we do have copies of Billy's reviews. And later, his friends also entrusted us with things they had collected for his memorial service. So those are 3 different websites that have finding aids on them. Basically, they're links to the finding aids. You can also just Google the William B. Harris papers and you will get here. They're nowhere else. When you go on one of these links, you will see something that looks like this. It is an inventory of all of the folders, all of the things in the collection, line by line, so that you can see in great detail what Mr. Harris collected and how he organized it. You can see that he's got it organized. Perhaps some of you can pick this out, that it is organized largely by the name of the playwright. And in the case of a very productive playwright like Edward Albee, it is then divided into the plays. But there's also other characters there, George Abbott, who's a theater producer, for example. So we've got these inventories. And when it comes to Billy's reviews, some of our students here matched the review to the file that contains the backup material for it. So that here, for example, in the center column, there's a folder that has a review of something by Joan Akalaitis, and Joanne Akalaitis, and her own folder in Billy's collection is folder 133. So you can see the review of something Billy saw, an actual live performance, and then you can see all this paperwork. And what do I mean by paperwork? Well, let's take a look at one of the folders, and let's see what we can get from that. I should stop for just a minute. Most of the things in the folders came from Mr. Harris's own hand. He was an obsessive clipper, and he also brought home programs. This one contains his handwriting there on the side, notes that he took as he was watching a fable by Jean-Claude Van Italy for review. However, as his friends realized what he was doing, and they couldn't help but realize it, because when you went to his apartment, there were all these metal filing cabinets, those sort of old-fashioned, metal filing cabinets, and they began to give Billy their programs and their theater memorabilia. So sometimes you can't really tell if he actually saw the play or one of his friends did. This one here, I'm almost sure that it was a gift from a friend, because Mr. Harris would have been only about 7 years old when the actual playbill was in use. So it might be his first time in the theater going to see Marcel Marceau, or it might be a gift from a friend. When we were doing the processing, when we were taking these papers out of the folders that Billy kept them in and putting them in archival folders, that is, folders that are specially treated so that it retards the deterioration of the paper, and it keeps it from getting brittle. When we were making that transfer, we found all kinds of things that were kind of fun for us to find. And this was our favorite example. Billy reviewed a play once, Ring Round the Moon, that had a cast that included an actor named Dan Diggles, who's on the left side there in profile in the picture. Professor Diggles taught here. He taught improv here for many years, and he was also the founder of the Marymount Manhattan Adjunct Collective, our part-time, our adjunct faculties union. So these things ended up having some relevance for us. They documented some things about us, but what can they do for a bigger researcher? So I'm going to dive into that right now. Let me just, can I check I can check the chat, and I can see that questions are coming in, and I'm going to make a transition to a topic right now so I can see, look, okay, we've got, someone's been nice enough to put the links in for us. So, so I don't see any questions right now. So let me just get out of the chat, dive into our first big topic, which is, what does this, okay, come on, move. There we go. What can we learn about the theater from this? And I'll have to admit, this is kind of my weakest topic. I'm trained as an historian. My specialty was immigration history. The first time I ever talked to the village preservation, I was talking about Our Lady of Pompeii on Bleecker and Carmine Street, because it had an Italian immigrant population at its founding. So this has really been kind of new for me. And so I kind of got started where our faculty starts our students. Our faculty has the students read a kind of classic text, History of the Theater by Oscar Brockett. And what I did was I read the chapter of History of the Theater on the avant-garde, which is nearly the last chapter, and I copied down all the names that I saw in the chapter, and then I ran it against the inventory. So basically compared the two lists. You can see, you already know Joanne Akalaitis was in our inventory, and Edward Albee was in our inventory. Of course, they appear in the Brockett text. And so do all the other names on this screen, which, as you see, goes down to letter L, Neil Laboute, La Mama Theater. And then there's another screen which picks up letter L, John Leguizame, Don Leguizamo, excuse me, I'm sorry about that, down to letter R, Jose Rivera, and then picks up again Anne DeVere Smith down to William Butler Yeats. So there were 3 cards here, a great many names that overlapped, that appeared in this very standard theater history, and also have folders in our collection. So what's in these folders? Let's take a look at one folder in particular, because Brockett uses Mabou Mines as an example of an experimental theater troupe as opposed to a playwright, but it doesn't really tell you what an experimental theater troupe might do. And Mr. Harris's files fill in those details. To start with, Billy saved advertisements. He seems to have been on every mailing list known to humanity, and he got all these things, which he then saved. And these 2 postcards are from 2 different productions in 2 different years of the same piece, Las Horas de Belén. Billy also saved clippings. I've got another advertisement there on the left, so that you can see that this is about animal magnetism, another Mabou Mines production. And over in the other side, there is a review, and it's not by Billy. It's by D.J.R. Bruckner, who was reviewing for the Times at the time, but it's got a little still photo from Animal Magnetism. You can pick up that rhinoceros character on both images there. And he's got clippings of his own work, of other people's work. You can see different reviews of the same production. You can see different reviews of different productions. Sometimes the productions are in different countries. Billy himself went to England frequently to see the theater, and of course he had transatlantic friends. He also saved the programs, and this one here, from the plays, from the programs, you can help rebuild a performance, and you can begin to see connections. And that's what those little red lines are for. The name here on that, Ron Vaughter, who appears on this program, which, as you can see, was lovingly mimeographed. Okay, so no playbill here. This is a pretty ephemeral piece of paper that I hope Mabou Mines still has a copy. And you can see that Ron Vaughter appears in several different places as an actor, as someone who was producing some film that I think went with this. This was a combined piece here, and as a soundtrack person. And we will run into him yet again in this collection. Then Billy just saved everything else. This memoir of working on a Mabou Mines show can probably be found online, but who knows? One thing Billy didn't do was cite his sources. He didn't date things. He didn't tell you where he got them from. A couple of students here did yeoman's work just dating Billy's own reviews, because he didn't even date his own reviews. And after some years of practice, I can tell from the typesetting where a review appeared. It was in the Village Voice, or it was in the SoHo Weekly, or it was in the Times, or in the Daily News. Billy was in a bunch of different things because he freelanced, but I can't tell when they appeared all the time. And I have to figure out, you have to look it up, and you do some triage work, triangulation work, and figure out what's going on there. Billy can take researchers far beyond Brockett. Mabou Mines is a name that appears in the Brockett text, and that's why I wanted to look at that folder in detail. But he's also got people who don't appear in the text. And I'll give you an example right here. One of the things the Brockett text says about the avant-garde is that one characteristic, one strain of it, was an inter-arts approach that combined dance and music and spoken word and visual art and moving pictures and so forth. And it didn't give an example of any such multidisciplinary artist, but there was one that Mr. Harris knew very well, Ping Chong. Billy kept a huge folder following Ping Chong's career, and studying that folder gives some nuance and detail to the generalizations in the textbook This particular thing, there's a still of a portrait of Mr. Chung on the top, and it's just a review of that Mr. Harris did on the bottom in the little tiny type. But there's way more than that in the folder. Ping Chung himself has a website with a production timeline and some digital documents, programs and things like that. But he doesn't have his correspondence with Billy on there. And we have that correspondence along with this Christmas card, which I included because it adds a retro dimension to our study of the downtown avant-garde. The correspondence includes Ping Chung's own analysis of audience reception of his OB winning Humboldt's Current. So you can see a lot of things, what people thought about their own work, how they were doing their work. They'd kvetch with Billy, or they'd, cheers, I've finally got something done and it's going off Broadway. There'd be all kinds of different things you can find. So one of the reasons we want to publicize these papers is that this is what we've been doing with them. So we know what we're doing with them and see what other people might find useful. Our own students use them for dramaturgy. Our own students take classes where they do the prep work for bringing something from page to stage. And of course, that means looking up past productions, and they've got a gold mine here. One reason I want to publicize the Harris papers is the students find it convenient for dramaturgy, and professionals might too, because Billy gathered multiple reviews in places that even the internet might miss. All of these are from a folder on Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage, reviews going back to the 70s, with different actresses playing the lead role and different takes on it and different productions of it. So that's one thing students do. They do dramaturgy. Another thing they do is they do the artwork. One of their favorite activities is to look at the advertising for a play to see what it captures about the play. Here, I've strayed from the avant-garde to present a sampling of different ads for the same play, Arthur Miller's Crucible. And I picked it because most people know the plot of the Crucible, at least, in broad outlines. It's about accusing people of witchcraft and so forth. And these were images from different productions of the Crucible. And one of the things the students can discuss is, so what do you learn about the play from the picture? What does it capture? What does it leave out? What does it show you about that? So that's one thing students do with this, is they look at the artwork. The other thing we do with it is it's just a great deal of fun for the students who've often, worked in textbooks, and increasingly they go online and they see things that are virtual. They click on buttons and things come up on a screen. But we actually have this poster, and who knew that once upon a time, Joe Papp sung? I didn't. And this was a great deal of fun for the students. And then there's just all this stuff that we even don't know anything about. We can't play this little record from Meredith Monk, which, as you can see, was personally inscribed to Billy. Many thanks and much love from Meredith up there on the top, because we don't have the equipment to play it, but we do have it sort of lovingly preserved. Okay, one thing that archivists look for, one other thing that we can do with this collection, because we have been lucky to add some other collections, is have collections talk to each other. So with the papers here, you can add things from another place or even from one of our own collections and put things together. And here from Mr. Harris's own collection of reviews is his review of something called Hollywood Confidential, with a still of Charles Busch playing the lead. That's Charles Busch there in the picture. Some of you know Mr. Busch being famous for several things. His play, The Allergist's Wife, which was, I think, on Broadway for some time. That he works in drag, as you can see in the picture, and that he writes plays that are spoofs of movie genres. And so Mr. Harris saw some of these plays. He reviewed some of these plays. He has a small folder on Charles Busch, but we also are lucky to have a whole collection devoted to Charles Busch. This is just one thing from it, the script for Hollywood Confidential. One of our professors got his PhD on the strength. His name was Richard Niles. Richard Niles got his PhD on the strength of the dissertation on Charles Busch, and he gave all of the material he collected for that dissertation to our archives, including interviews with Charles Busch and with the staff that supported his performances, either as colleagues in a performance or because they were doing the wigs and the wardrobe and the makeup for him. And this one I'm quite charmed with myself. This one here, Mr. Harris has a folder, many folders on Edward Albee, because Albee was such a prolific playwright that Billy just had too much stuff and he began dividing it up by play. And his folder on the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf has this terrific little parlor game in it. Did you know that Marlo Thomas once took on the role of Martha? And also, who do you think would make a better honey? Mia Farrow or Cynthia Nixon? So this sort of thing can be an endless parlor game with our students, but I want to call your attention to the ad that's on my right, the one of the man and the woman facing each other, which indicates that Colleen Dewhurst and Ben Gazzara are playing the leads, Martha and George, and the secondaries are being played by a Richard Kelton and a Maureen Anderman. Maureen Anderman called us one day, and despite the fact that I probably made her feel so good about her 50-year career in acting, because this is not my specialty. I had not known anything about it. She still gave us her papers. That's Maureen in there posing with Edward Albee. And that's her playing Honey, some stills from that 1976 production. She not only has a set of stills that show you the costuming and the blocking and the setting and all of the other things. She's got a script, she's got notes, she's got her own clippings, she's got correspondence with the other people. She was friends with Colleen Dewhurst. And this one is sort of a triple, because Colleen Dewhurst is an honorary degree recipient here at Marymount Manhattan College. So we also have stuff in our own archive about her, photographs of her receiving her degree here, speaking here, and so forth. So we can put together quite a bit using this material. So I'm going to move to another topic. As you see, we changed colors. So let me take a quick look at the chat, which seems to have gone a little quiet. That's good. Everybody's resting or thinking or something. And we're going to move on to look at what this collection tells us, not about theatrical pieces, but about places. And in order to get the list of places, what I did was to go through Billy Harris's reviews and write down where he saw the plays. And there's quite a list. And this is just the below Chelsea, or about Chelsea, because you can see Hudson Guild at 26th Street on the list. So I think Chelsea was as far north as I went. He did review things on Broadway. He reviewed Broadway plays. He reviewed things that were further uptown as well. But I was looking at downtown for this lecture, so I've got here a list of the things that he reviewed in various downtown settings. Some of them are quite ephemeral. Back East Theater, I don't think is there anymore. Some of them, of course, are quite traditional. Cherry Lane Theater, the Hudson Guild, that sort of thing. And there is, or should be, let's get that going. Can I get that going? Another page of them. He reviewed a great deal for La Mama. He not only reviewed things at the Minetta Lane Theater, he reviewed the theater itself. He had pieces on the fellows who bought the theater and restored it and put it together. And he has quite a bit of material from the Public Theater, and again, going all the way down to, letter W and onto 4th Street. And again, some of this is quite ephemeral. I'm not sure 206 West Broadway is a residence. It's a big, used to be either where the Singer Patterns or the Singer Thread was made. And now it's a condominium residence or an apartment residence. And so it must have done some plays at some time. And I've got some little stories to tell you about 4 places that are in the area Village Preservation covers. And the first one is, the story took place in February 5th, 1978, on a cold and snowy evening. Theater critic Billy Harris headed out to 39 Grove Street to see a performance of H.N. Leavitt's The Beasts, which imagined a day in the life of Rudolf Hess during the time he was the only prisoner in Spandau, with gods from the World War II alliance of France and the Soviet Union and the UK and the US watching over him, and Hitler and Goering materializing from wherever they are now to talk about the Third Reich. Billy found the play as bleak as the weather. So it was an exciting night at 39 Grove, which turns out to have an exciting history. It has many ghosts besides Hitler and Goering. I went through the New York Times just looking for references to the address, and the first one I found was December 8th, 1895, when police raided a brothel that the New York Times claimed had been operating there since 1860. It's not clear what the building looked like then, because the Times didn't carry pictures in 1895. And the building itself was torn down in 1905 and replaced with a 4-story rental residence with ground floor commercial space. And theatrical performances in the space date from 1958. In 1974, its longest running tenant that I can find, the Little People's Theater Company, moved in. It performed performances for children. And by the 90s, it was facing 2 issues. The building department was beginning to wonder if the place was zoned for this purpose, for having an audience, given the conditions in the building. And the theater itself was facing such financial difficulties that the owner of the building secured an eviction notice on them. So you can actually sort of see the cycle there. The company's having trouble. It's not paying the bills. The landlord is then having trouble. The landlord's deferring maintenance. That bounces back to the company, and the building people come and pay some unfriendly calls. And by the early 2000s, ironically, from the point of view of Billy's night with Rudolf Hess, it was a German-themed restaurant. It's still a restaurant. It's a different restaurant now. It's called Emmett's now. But that's just one building that had this performance in the 1970s, that the building is still there. The building still has a story. The building's now used for something else, no performances now. Another one, in February of 77, a little before he went to the Beasts, a year before he went to the Beasts, Billy saw a revival of Dutchman, a play that Amiri Baraka had written under his birth name, Leroy Jones, in 1964. In 1964, it was the racial issues of the play that made it very important and significant piece of theater. When Billy saw it, he was much more taken with the gender relationships and with the connections between male and female in the play, because he'd seen it in the late 70s. And he saw it at 31 Perry Street, which looks like this. And when this area first appeared on the map, this one I can trace back even further than 39 Grove, all the way back to the owner, Sir Peter Warren, who was given this land because he was a Commodore. He actually bought it. I'm sorry, he wasn't given it. He purchased it. But he was a Commodore in the British Navy. And the way he was able to purchase the land was that he captured enemy ships. He was kind of like a pirate for the British Navy. He captured enemy ships and he kept their stuff. That the ship went to the British, and the ship and the crew became prisoners of the British, and he got kind of a commission for this sort of thing. And he became quite wealthy, and he bought all this land, and he died in 1752, and he left the land to his daughters. And during his daughters' lifetimes, the area went from a big tract that Warren just purchased and held. He had an estate building there, but it was mostly farmland. And then it became townhouses, became part of the city. The city grows up towards there, and the girls, the sisters, they weren't girls by then, they were young ladies, began selling parcels of land to developers who laid out streets and erected buildings. And the middle of the block, where 31 Perry is, was sort of less desirable because it's the middle of the block. And so somebody put up 2 wooden buildings there. It wasn't a development with a row of houses. There was a row to one side and a row to the other side, but this middle thing had these 2 wooden buildings on it until 1902, when the owner tore down the wooden houses and put up what you see here, which for him was a stable. That's why the doors are the way they are. Originally, this was to back a carriage into the lower level, and also to back a horse into the lower level, and put the horse in the stable and give it the hay. And then the upper places were rental units, not very expensive ones, because you were living above smelly horses. But at that time, the village was beginning to attract a great many people who needed inexpensive rents, immigrants, folks working jobs on the longshoremen's jobs on the west side of the Hudson River, people like that. In 1975, the building was renovated. It still retained residents on the upper level, but the lower level was supposed to become a movie theater. But almost immediately, it started having live performances instead of movies. The first one being a Sicilian puppet theater, staging a marionette version of The Duel of Orlando and Agripine. Over the next 30 years, the venue hosted live theater, including Dutchman, and the real estate value just sort of grew as the neighborhood around it transitioned from places that people rented for these small performances to places that they purchased for the retail, for the value of the real estate, or that they purchased because they were going to run a flagship store or open a condo or something like that. And that happened to this building in 2003. When Andrea Soros Colombo, the daughter of financier George Soros, purchased the building. It was cost $2.6 million in 2003, and she continued to rent out the bottom to theatrical performances. She used the top floors for a philanthropy that she was interested in, for the offices for it. And then in 2006, she got an opportunity. She finished out the lease on the performing theater in the downtown, a big deceased performing, and sold the whole building for 5 times what she paid for it to someone who turned it into residences. So instead of being a theater, it became residences. Here's another story about another place. This is the script for Home. Billy has about 100 scripts, which I think he probably got because he attended the read-throughs of some plays and because he was friends with some playwrights. So a lot of reasons that he could have got these scripts. And in fact, this one, it's hard to tell, when he got it, because he attended the play in December of 1978. It's a play is called Home. It's by Sam Art Williams, and it centers on the life of Cephas Miles, a Black North Carolina farmer. When Billy saw it, the farmer was played by actor Charles Brown, who, by changing his costume and his body language, took the various roles of a farm boy, a draftee refusing induction into the Vietnam War, a lost soul in the big city, and finally an older man back on his farm. Billy praised the play, in his SoHo Weekly review. And he wasn't the only one. Charles Brown and the play were up for Tony Awards in 1980, a little later, although they both lost to Children of a Lesser God. Billy saw the play here at 131, 133 St. Mark's. In 1944, which is the earliest reference I've seen to this building, building plans were filed to convert the building, which was next to the library, the German library that's now part of New York Public. You can just see a little bit of the brick there on what's my right side. The part that I'm really focusing on, the 4th-floor thing with the fire escapes, was converted to shops and theaters in 1944. Judging from the looks of it, it might have been a small loft factory. It was a place that was used for industry. The first advertisement for performance came in 1958 when the New York Times announced that the Dance Drama Company would present 6 weeks of performance in the newly opened St. Mark's Playhouse. The Negro Ensemble Company, which performed Dutchman and performed Home, moved in during August of '67 and performed Home here. And out in 1980, shortly after Billy saw the play, about 2 years after Billy had seen the play. During that time, they occupied the 3rd floor. And I'm not sure if that means they only had offices up there or there was also space to see a play up there. By 2011, the building was converted again to through floor condominiums, to residences, and just the ground floor was used for shops. The rest of it had become residences instead of theater or business or something. Last one, and one of my absolute favorites, Billy saw a revival of The Poor of New York. And he also saved a clipping from someone else who saw this same revival and liked the play and recommended it to people and said, don't be afraid to go there. You have to go all the way to the end of Jane Street. You have to go to West Street, and it's really broken down. It's really dark and you can't see any street lights, but don't worry, the play is worth it. So it was quite the neighborhood, apparently. The performance was in the basement of an SRO that had once been a lodging, a cheap hotel for sailors. It was run by a philanthropy, not even by a business. Sailors in the early 20th century had to wait while their ships turned around, while the ship was unloaded, because they didn't have mechanics for that. It was all people, like you see on the waterfront, unloading the ship, and it could take them a week. And then it had to be reloaded and, of course, stocked with the food and stuff for the sailors. And the sailors had to like sit around and wait until this happened. So they needed some inexpensive lodging, and they found it at this place. So just like the family in The Poor of New York, that's the point of the play. These people think they've lost all their money and they think they've become poor, and their lifestyle undergoes this dramatic change, and the daughter's chances for marriage are blasted, and it's a melodrama, lots of plot points. But just like that, the fortunes turned around, and after many years of providing space for these kinds of theater performances, almost the last one it provided space for was in its ballroom, which by then had suffered water damage and didn't have any ballroom furniture anymore. It had bleachers in it. I'm not sure what they were doing before that. And it was the bleachers that the audience sat on for the New York premiere of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And people putting on that performance took one look at, and the play Hedwig and the Angry Inch is about a performing artist. It's a play about performance. And they took one look at this place and they said, that's exactly the kind of place Hedwig would have played. So that's why they wanted it. But not long after Hedwig, which got the building a lot of attention, it was bought by real estate developers who turned it into the Jane Hotel, which is its persona. In this picture, you can see the hotel sign there. But this past February, a hotelier named Jeff Klein bought it and is going to turn it into a private club, not a place where just anybody stays, but one of those kind of venues where you've got belong to stay, like the Yale Club or something. Okay, last one. You may recognize La Mama here with all the people in front of it going to a performance. And this time, Billy helped to preserve a theater instead of give publicity to a building that went on from becoming a place for ephemeral performances to a condo or to a shop or something like, or a hotel, a boutique hotel, some kind of more upscale thing. He was one of the people who just constantly reviewed things from La Mama Theater, and the building itself goes way back to 1873, and it was always a venue associated with performance. It was originally sort of the headquarters for something called the Aschenbrodelverein, an organization of professional orchestral musicians of German extraction, which is a pretty specific group. The organization moved out in 1892, and a German singing society called the Gesangverein Schülerbund moved in, and they hired a couple of architects who added those little white dots that you see. Those are really busts of composers. It's just, you can't really see what they are from here. The Gesangverein moved out in 1896, and the building became rental property. And in the 1960s, it was a food plant. And that's what it was when Ellen Stewart bought it. She got a grant from the Ford Foundation, and she used the grant for real estate and made that investment. And it turned out to be a very good thing because the space allowed her to put down roots. So La Mama not only has theater here, it has its own archive. I think some of you may have been to a village preservation show where someone took people around La Mama's archive. It allows you to be very experimental. You don't have a landlord to worry about. And it kind of anchors the community the way that, because this was a theatrical community to begin with. That's what attracted the developers who made condos and other kinds of things. But some things have to remain a theater for this to work out properly. This is a letter from Ellen Stewart to Billy. I'm not sure what prompted the letter. It was written in 1992, and I've tried to track it down. Whatever it wasn't in any newspaper that is online at the moment. It says, "Dear Billy, you've created a miracle for La Mama. You have written things about me, things about La Mama that have never been written before, and I never thought would see the light of day, but now it is more like a whole big sunrise. Someday we'll find out what it was." Okay, as you can see, I'm changing colors here. So we're changing things, and I can look in the chat real quick. Someone says the buildings are beautiful. Yeah, and is that you? Oh, that's Nikki Perizzo. You're gonna be a star in just a moment, sir. You inspired the next part of this talk. And there's along the same vein, does it preserve plays about race, identity, gender issues? Okay, this would be very interesting. We'll have to look into that and see. So yeah, there's yes, American Thread. Thank you. Someone's identified 260 Broadway, American Thread. I said singer, and I was wrong about that. So we've got a bunch of different comments, but no questions right now. And thank you for that correction there. So and also Nikki has got it. Billy Harris did a profile of Ellen for the New York Times. That might be why I've not tracked it down. I was thinking he'd reviewed something rather than her. So that might be it. Anyway, this picks up from something about 10 years after the papers came to to here at Marymount. We had a number of Mr. Harris's friends come, and one of them was Nikki Perizzo, and he made this comment that Billy might have all that's left of the careers of some of the people whose lives were cut short by the advent of AIDS in the very, very late 1970s, in the 1980s. And I just put this little card up, this little advertisement for Gargoyles, a gay romance for a dark age, because that phrase, a dark age, is really what speaks to this next section. And here I want to bring back, I think I have to click on something to go from chat. There we are. Here I want to bring back Pretty Boy, the little Mabu Mines program with Ron Vaughter all over it. Mr. Vaughter was not only a part of this ensemble here, he had another career about the time he himself began to notice the symptoms of AIDS. He was beginning work on what became this one-man show where he played two people. One was Roy Cohn, that's the one in the suit, and one was Jack Smith, himself a performing artist. And he'd created this show where he played these two people, two different men who you can see from their pictures, they're actually pictures of Ron Vaughter playing the two men, with two different approaches to their own homosexuality. And as you can see by the handwriting on the card, he invited Billy to a performance for his friends and found at the Worcester Garage one evening, a kind of a prelim to the bigger performance. So and Billy saved this little card. He also saved Mr. Vaughter's program when he passed away of a heart attack in 1994. He preserved the program and a whole folder about this person's career. And he's got this for a great many people. Now, he doesn't have a folder called People I Know Who Died of AIDS or People I Know who suffered from this or anything like that. You have to kind of, page through them, and every so often you'll notice a person, and I've begun to kind of keep a little index because I would love to find a way to honor these people and to remember what we have. And once I went to an archive, a little display of archives at NYU in the Bobst Library, and found out that they had collections from several Greenwich Village societies that were also documenting the early years of the AIDS crisis and the organizations that protested and were activists in getting people care and things like this. This is just one example. The Times had the obit for George Osterman, but Billy has this picture of Mr. Osterman serving up brunch one day. And also, again, a folder full of cards and programs and things, again, that indicate that he knew Mr. Osterman, he knew this person. And that's the flip side of the Don't Remind Me, a musical disaster of titanic proportions there. Similarly, in the Times version of Huck Snyder's obituary, you can see the headline, Designed Stage Sets. The obit does mention briefly that Mr. Snyder did act and perform in things, and Billy has the posters from his shows. Circus, which is right here, that's the one that's actually mentioned in the Times, so that's why they're paired on this page. And this is all one poster, okay, all one poster that does not get mentioned in the Times. This particular performance of, let me see where it is, Limbo. It's a performance of the Limbo Gallery. Did not get mentioned in the Times, so there's a kind of a fuller review of Mr. Snyder's work here. And I'm going to give you one final story. You probably all know the playwright Craig Lucas, maybe for such relationship pieces, Prelude to a Kiss, Reckless, so forth. Billy maintained a thick file of Lucas's Broadway playbills, and tucked into the program is this invitation to a surprise party for Craig Lucas. And the coordinator for the party was Dr. Tim, Lucas's partner at the time. Dr. Tim also contracted AIDS and passed away, and Billy went to the memorial and saved the program. This is the front and back side of the program. I didn't do the flip side because there's addresses, of course, and phone numbers and stuff on these things. And I did use a little blackout you saw on the invitation from Dr. Tim. You won't know where to send your RSVP to, but I just couldn't use enough. It would look like something the CIA produced if I did that here. So I just did this side with the picture. But I did want to send this. That's the front of the card. And that's a little thank you Billy got from Mr. Lucas for some flowers that he sent. The flowers are lovely, and you are too. And he was lovelier than I think Mr. Lucas knew, because he saved all this stuff. And I'm sitting here in the archive with this whole world around me. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. And I'm going to ask, because I think Leanne might be better help checking on questions and seeing if I can answer any of these questions and see what's going on. Okay, I can see a question here. Fabulous collection. Family must be thrilled. Let's see here. That is not actually a question. Do we have a question? Can you see what's going on in that? I'm
so
moving it around.
We have a couple questions. Sorry, I had some feedback. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I can hear you. So one question was, do you have, I mean, Mary, as you were going through, you kind of answered this, but do you have any sense of how much of the collection is not saved anywhere else, or would that be a whole other project to figure that out?
Oh, we could definitely figure that out. Because like I say, I know La Mama has an archive. I know, I don't know if Mabu Mines has one. I'm certainly, they've got plenty of material over the years. Some people, I know New York Public Library has some collections that might touch on this, but I don't know. I don't know. You know, nowadays it's more common for people like Ping Chong has this online archive. You can just go and visit this online thing with his posters and things like that. But of course, the onlines are usually self-curated. You see, you know, the kinds of things that people are willing to share. In the case of copyright, the things people can share. I don't know how much of this is not, let me put it this way, no folder is reproducible. All of the folders would just be here because they're a mix. You know, you get, you certainly get something from Playbill, and you get something from the New York Times, and you get some clipping from the Daily News, and then you get an advertisement that came to Billy's house in the mail. So you get all these different things that would exist together nowhere else, which is sort of another aspect of this.
Yeah, I think
but the
getting into the
things,
mind, yeah, is part of like the mind of the artist and the mind of the critic is very interesting.
That part there, but it's like, yeah, Playbill, you know, Playbill Vault has one run of these things, you know, so there probably different things exist in different places, but the business of bringing it together is only here. And some of this other stuff, I just don't know. I don't know who collects and who died before they could collect, and, you know, that sort of thing. I'm still learning myself.
And the personal touches are so beautiful too, of those moments of, I think it's a good reminder as another generation who creates art in New York to see like the daily life of artists then and how it parallels to now, especially during that time. I think that's fascinating. So then we had a question, did he ever cross over to writing or participating in production of plays or dance?
It went the other way around. When he was a young person, and we do have some of, you know, Mr. Harris's own memorabilia from his high school days and so forth. When he was a young person, he participated in theater. He was in a high school production. He participated in college. But by the time he got to New York, he was firmly in the audience. I don't see any, he was a terrific creative writer of reviews. I think there's a lot of creativity in reviews, being able to see things from a certain perspective and stuff like that. I think he was a very creative writer of reviews. But in terms of writing a play himself, I've seen no evidence of it. The family has not mentioned it to me, that he was doing anything, ever did anything like that. Some of his friends are here. They may know more than I do about that side of things.
Yep. Nikki got back to us and said Billy Harris was unique among theater dance writers because he actually befriended the artists themselves, including himself as a young performer and artist actor. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. You mentioned that he sometimes reviewed Broadway productions. Does the collection show much attention to large commercial shows? Was the question.
That is a very good question. Short answer, yes, he's got a big run of, everything Edward Albee did, because I think Albee's career almost spanned Billy's. He's got a big run of Miller, of Tennessee Williams, he's got a big run of Shakespeare, many, many different productions of Shakespeare, not just the public theater, summer productions at the Delacorte or something, but, productions that were on Broadway. He's got August Wilson. He's got a number of names that are famous on Broadway here. David Mamet. He's got all of those kinds of people here too. They're represented again with programs. They're represented with clippings. He knew some of those people personally. He doesn't have any personal correspondence with Arthur Miller, for example. But some of the other people like Craig Lucas, who has plays on Broadway, he apparently, knew personally. So yeah, it does run the gamut from the very, very, very well known to the seems to have only done this once, folders. The only one, and it's for my students a bit of a disappointment, is he does not have tons of musical theater. He has a folder on Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it's interesting. He has a folder on Andrew Lloyd Webber, despite that he has many things from Webber, stuff from Joseph and the Technicolor Raincoat, stuff from Cats, stuff from Starlight Express. He's got all the different plays. He never sorted it out. Whereas he's got, Albee meticulously sorted out, Miller's meticulously sorted out, Tennessee Williams, Brian Friel, Brian Friel, F-R-I-E-L, Tom Stoppard. It's got a bunch of Tom Stoppard stuff, all neatly sorted. David Mamet, neatly sorted. Rodgers and Hammerstein, all in one folder. So I don't think he was as interested in musical theater in some ways as he was in straight theater.
And then someone, oops, wrong one. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to get the best audio here. So someone suggested a couple interesting things. The Sun being contacted in respect to a lobby display of his work, maybe. And then asked if the New York Public Library is a good fit to research and preserve things.
Well, it was interesting because I don't know if the family approached New York Public. When they approached, I was not part of that level. My boss was. My boss was the acquisitions person. I take care of it. I take care of the paper level. I wasn't the acquiring person, so I don't know if the family approached New York Public. I don't know what the answer was, because the collection is just fabulous in many ways. It'd be wonderful. I think it does have a lot of synergy with New York Public. There are things here that are then also have more at New York Public, more material at New York Public. What those things are, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's got to be some connection because they have a terrific performing arts set. And I know one of our other collections, we have papers from George and Ethel Martin. And George and Ethel Martin, they were dancers, for people for whom the names are a little unfamiliar. They were dancers, and then they did a lot of backstage work as choreographers and stage managers and stuff like that. And they were eventually interviewed, and the interview is at New York Public. Much of their papers, because they are dancers, much of their papers went to Jacob's Pillow and to places like that. So yeah, there's a lot of synergy there. In case of Marymount, we would not be doing a lobby display because our lobby is already spoken for. Our lobby is the Hewitt Gallery, named for Marcia Hewitt, one of our alums and a generous one. And it does a rotating display of the visual arts. Right now, we've got a display from our own students, but we also do shows from folks who are out, come apply and get picked, and the show is curated. So we don't really have the kind of space. I'm hoping to be able to do kind of online type exhibits if I can get the bandwidth and such here to do that. I think that would be a helpful idea.
I think this is so many ideas are coming up from this, and I would love to talk to you more, Mary, about that and support that effort, because I think it's very important for our downtown history. And lots of really great things in the chat and suggestions. No questions right now.
But no, suggestions are fine. Keep them coming. There's a way I can preserve the chat and read them all.
I'll take some.
I think you have to preserve the chat, Leanne, because I don't have all that control. But if someone can preserve the chat, I'll take the suggestions and run with them. This has been. This is an enormous privilege to have these things. I'm sorry, I'm looking because they're around. Here, if I turn it this way, there you can see them.
How incredible. How does it feel? My question is, Mary, how does it feel in the space with all that history around you? Like, do you feel different? I mean, it's your daily life, so maybe not, but do you feel differently when you walk into a space like that? Or is there some kind of vibe?
Oh, it's fascinating because we do this with students. And like I said, the students they're so used to stuff being online. They're so used to stuff being in a book that you open a box and you pull things out and it's like, wait a minute, that's right. Like I have an original course. That's one of the few musical theater things Billy has, is he has not quite the original chorus line, but the first one to say it had won an award. He's got the poster, with a little sign that says, winner of Tony Award, something like that. So it's and they're just fascinated to see these things and to see all the little pieces and see them fit together. And it's a constant surprise. People email me sometimes and ask, do we have? And yes, we do. Who would have thought? But we do. There's a wonderful story, Tennessee Williams, late in life, because Tennessee Williams had a tough life. And at some point, every time he produced a play, almost all of the news was, is he going to make it this time? Is this play like, halfway decent, or is it, the sign of somebody who's, kind of washed up or something? And there's just this wonderful folder of a lovely Sunday for Crèvecoeur, lovely Sunday for Crèvecoeur. Crèvecoeur is a neighborhood. And it's a little relationship story. I think there's like 3 main characters, and it's just a wonderful folder with, reviews from different people and interviews with different people who were in the play. And the play itself was at Hudson Guild, and just a wonderful little story. And like I say, a very exciting one, because, everyone's like, does he still have it? So it's a terrific, every folder's a surprise.
I think that's fascinating. And I've learned a lot today. I know I'm inspired. I'm thinking about all my playbills and what I should do with them at some point. But I think the conversation also about archiving and preservation is great, because that's what we're about. We have our own archives at Village Preservation. And just to speak to the person's question, I think a lot has to do with a person's history and connections, where they want to archive their things, because Mary, as you mentioned, the dancers may be Jacob's Pillow, there are all those connections. And I find that too, when people come to us about archiving things, they usually have a deep connection with village preservation and there's a trust there. And I think that's similar from the story you shared as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's do one last check of any questions. So we're getting some very nice thank yous in the chat, and I'm preserving all of this. But any last questions going once, going twice? Because then the funny thing about Zoom webinars is when we hang up, we all go away instantly. We don't get to hang out after a good show or something and chat. But while we're waiting to see if any other questions come in, Mary, I am so grateful that you approached me and we were able to do this. I think it was wonderful. And thank you all for being here with us.
Anytime.
Well, I might take you up on that. And so we also recorded. So if you're here and you'd like to share this with your students, it takes a day or two to turn this around, but we'll have a version on YouTube that you can share, and we'll share that with everyone who registered. Mary's been so gracious to let us do that. So more to come, hopefully, but at least you can definitely share this. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I agree. It was a fabulous program. Mary, so much gratitude. Thank you. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.